Hello and welcome to what is likely to be the last IB Geography vlog of the year. Today we're going to be talking about the analysis of risk, and this is allocated 3 hours in the syllabus, and we have to examine the relationship between the degree of risk posed by a hazard and the probability of a hazard event occurring, the predicted losses, and the community's preparedness for it, explain the reasons why individuals and communities often underestimate the probability of hazard events occurring, and to discuss the factors that determine an individual's perception of the risk posed by hazards. To properly understand and analyze risk, we have to understand two key terms, that is vulnerability and risk. So vulnerability is the susceptibility of a community to a hazard or to the impacts of a hazard event, while risk is the probability of a hazard event causing harmful consequences, as in death, injury, loss of property, damage to the environment, etc. The perception of risk varies from person to person. For example, a daredevil might see certain stunts less risky than a normal person would because he has greater experience in performing such stunts. In a similar way, there are many different factors that affect a person's or a society's perception of risk. These factors include personal experience or familiarities with the hazard, your personality, your knowledge of the hazard and the hazard events, as well as your economic status, as in if you live in a strong house with the money to afford to escape, or if you're living in an informal settlement. A person's perception of a risk is typically associated with the fear one has about regarding that risk. Certain types of hazards evoke a greater response in the terms of fear, and therefore have a greater risk perception. These include hazards that are uncontrollable, such as large hurricanes and tsunamis, and also large-scale, fast impact, and high-magnitude hazard events, for example, tsunamis and earthquakes. On the other hand, people are often less concerned with hazard events that are slow impact and low magnitude, as well as hazard events that usually have few fatalities, such as small floods or avalanches. Another factor that affects the perception of risk is awareness. For example, obviously a person that is not aware of the hazard or doesn't know about it cannot perceive risk in the same way that a person that is repeatedly warned about it and has experience with the hazard. Knowing about the perception of a risk, we now move on to risk assessment, which is calculating the likely risk of a hazard happening. People are constantly taking risks. For example, we take a risk every time we go outside or cross the street, even though this risk is small. Before taking risks, we usually perform a risk assessment to see if the event is too risky to perform, or if it is safe enough or not risky enough to perform. And when we look at a risk assessment, we usually look at a number of variables to determine how risky an action is. For example, we can look at the potential hazard of it. So, for example, we look at the likelihood of the hazard to see how frequent something is happening, how likely the impact or what problems the hazard will cause, who will be at risk, or like who will be affected by the hazard if it occurs, as well as the mitigation and how we can reduce the threat of the hazard. After performing a risk assessment, if the score of the potential hazard is too high, then the risk will not be taken, obviously. Although high risk can also be traded off for high rewards. Thank you very much for watching, and I will not see you next week. Thank you for watching the last episode of Eric's Geography Vlogs, and have a good day.